Coal knew too. Explosive report shows industry was aware of climate threat as far back as 1966.
Here's a summary of the article.
A new report shows conclusively that the coal industry was aware of the climate impacts of burning fossil fuels as far back as 1966 and, like other sectors of the fossil fuel industry with knowledge of the consequences of their business model, did next to nothing about it. It wasn't just Big Oil that knew about climate change decades ago, tweeted HuffPost editor Kate Shepard. In the journal, James R. Garvey, president of now-defunct research firm Bituminous Coal Research Inc., describes the future consequences of coal. If the future rate of increase continues as it is at the present, it has been predicted that, because the CO2 envelope reduces radiation, the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere will increase and that vast changes in the climates of the Earth will result. The entire fossil fuel industry knew about the risks of climate change and covered it up for decades, all to make a buck, said Earther reporter Brian Kahn. As Young writes in her article, it's difficult to know what the revelations in her reporting will result in as far as damages or accountability. Even as the Trump administration has promised a coal resurgence and rolled back Obama-era regulations, the industry's profitability continues to experience a downward slide, writes Young.
This post received a score of 37,274, with an upvote ratio of 92%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
My dad was a chemical engineer who worked at a fertilizer plant. I remember him talking about the greenhouse effect back around 1975. They all knew what was up.
They were teaching it in elementary school in the 80s.
Two things I learned in kindergarten: the big red country on the globe was called USSR even though it definitely said CCCP on it. The lamp over the glass bowl made it get warmer, and the air around the Earth did the same thing because of the carbon oxide. SAR Souz Sovetski Socialisticheski Respublik is a Russian abbreviation for the Soviet Union or Union of Soviet Socialist Republics USSR. I wondered why it was CCCP too.
The SSSR, in case people were wondering. It was called URSS in Italy, Union del Republic Socialista Sovietish, but yeah, it's just the same thing translated.
I'm sure it's quite similar in Spanish and French and Portuguese simply because of how the Latin grammar works versus Germanic. Like how SI units for metric is standard international cause, the French made it.
Quite right. In French it's Union des Républiques Socialistes Soviétiques. Edit, des Républiques. Because indeed there were many of them. Thanks for looking out, Reddit.
União das Repúblicas Socialistas Soviéticas in Portuguese.
Unión de Repúblicas Socialistas Soviéticas in Spanish.
And yet people still insist there isn't one, even when all of these industries know about it. It fucking floors me how badly, and how obviously people can get conned out of money and time, and still defend them to the death. I think that for some people it would be very scary to accept something like this, so they choose to ignore it.
Denial. To keep weak people sane.
No, denial, because developing a global eco-alternative is one of the most difficult and expensive tasks our global civilization would partake in. It's not about her der stupid, the matter is incredibly costly on the entire economic scale. Edit, not excusing their lateness to addressing global warming, just to be very clear. Politics and regulation are unfortunately too slow, but that's the fact.
That isn't and hasn't been true for well over a decade. Maintaining and growing our oil infrastructure is vastly more expensive, but the money is going into the right pockets. Renewable and zero-carbon energy for the grid has been viable as the main means of power production since at least the 80s. Putting even basic regulations on international flights and ships would have done an enormous amount of good without huge disruptions. The story with alternative power vehicles hasn't been as promising until this decade, though we can't honestly say whether or not that was a matter of inertia more than it was a matter of viability if we actually gave a shit.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.